If you're a driven, active person who wants to reach and pursue a higher quality life with some ambition, then guess what? This podcast is for you. This is the Driven Athlete Podcast. What's up, y'all? It's your man, Dr. Kyle. The Driven Athlete Podcast. I'm excited that you're here to chat with us. So a common question that I've gotten recently, somebody recently was asking me like, I've been running more and my knee is clicking. What's that? Right? So knee clicking. Well, it can come from a lot of different things and a lot of different behind the scenes or previous stuff that has happened changes the answer as well. So in this particular person, they had an ACL reconstruction surgery 5 years ago. All right. And then they recently had been trying to dive more into running. All right. So without knowing all the other full history, right? This person's younger, like they're in their mid 30s and they want to start running for 5Ks. They want to train. I'm like, awesome. Let's get after it, dude. Let's do the right things and support and set the stage for your success in that. Because running 5Ks is fun, and it's a goal of yours. Let's get after it. I'm here to support you. You can do this, right? It can be done. But anyway, so this person had a ACL reconstruction 5 years ago. They're in the mid 30s and they just recently started running. So my question would be, in the last 5 years after your surgery, number one, what was the rehab like? Do you feel like when you kind of finished your really purposeful rehab and efforts on getting your knee back after surgery, do you feel like you got back to like 100% symmetry strength, leg to leg, like pre-surgery, pre-injury strength? Did you achieve at least 90% of the strength that you did prior to the injury? If the answer is like not really, then like the rehab was insufficient and you were set for failure for stuff later, as in like exercise, squats, lunges, step ups, Bulgarian split squats, reverse lunges, lateral lunges, Cossack squats, like whatever, Zercher squats, all the lower body exercise that people would do for health and wellness and fun. They was set up for compensation patterns, because if it's not as strong and it's 80% the strength that it was, what do you think the other leg's going to do? It's going to overcompensate, right? Especially for double leg exercises. So then, all right, it's like it was insufficient. I didn't get 90 to 95% of my limb symmetry strength as my other leg or pre-surgery strength. So it was set up for not the best success to begin with. And then between then, which was like a year of a rehab, right? That's what I would usually, for adults, it's usually like 6 to 8 months because they're not athletes and the insurance runs out. It's what happens. Or they get to a functional level of like, I can work and I can play with my kids and I can climb stairs and I really haven't noticed an issue. And then the commitment level of like full dive for 6 more months, it just fizzles out because they're good now at this point for like an active life. And then they say a year later, you know what? I want to get back to strength and I want to improve my physique, improve my health and wellness. Perfect. Let's go. And then they get back to exercising, like lower body workouts, like I was just describing, lunges, squats, deadlifts, kettlebell swings, Bulgarian split squat, like whatever, all the lower body exercise on top of a leg that was only 80 to 85%. Usually it's like 80% of the strength that it was prior. So a lot of compensations and avoidance, fear avoidance, lack of confidence avoidance through that leg with leg exercises, which increases the disparity of strength. The other leg is getting stronger and the surgery leg isn't getting as strong as rapidly as that one. So they're both getting stronger, but it's like that. One leg is getting way stronger faster, and the other one is getting stronger, but not at the same rate. And it doesn't reach the same level of symmetry. So it just increases the disparity of strength and the compensation issues that will come after. So then they're like, and I want to run 5Ks. Well, running is way more challenging to not compensate than more controlled lower body exercise like lunges or squats or something like that. It's way easier to compensate with running. All right. It's a series of single leg falls and more impact. All right. So it's higher impact than a smooth controlled motion of like a lower body workout exercise. So the compensation patterns, unknowingly, subconscious, and then very subtle, that just adds up. I mean, you run a 5K, it's 3.1 miles, right? So like you run 3 miles and you do that. Let's say you run 1.5 miles and you've been running 10 miles a week, let's say 12 miles a week. I mean, how many steps? That's 5,280 feet per mile. And then let's say you run like, a jog, you're completing like 2 feet a distance per step. Oh my gosh. I mean, that's, if you run 10 miles a week, that's 52,000 feet divided by, it's 25,000 running steps per week of just training, not even just like walking around your house and work and playing with your kids and stuff like that. There's a lot of mild and subtle little compensation episodes every single step. That adds up, right? And that's only 1 week times it's, I've been running for 6 months now. I mean, that's 20, well, I mean, what is that, 20 weeks, right? 26 weeks. That's 26 weeks of 6 months, right? I mean, times 25,000. That's a lot of steps and micro compensations that occur every time that just accumulates. All right. And then over time, over that length of time, like it's been clicking more. So that's part of my conversation, as in like, oh, you had ACL reconstruction 5 years ago. Oh, the rehab seemed to be insufficient where you weren't able to gain. It's not your fault. It's more of like you weren't able to make it happen because of a lot of factors, but because life happens. But you weren't able to gain up to at least 95% of your limb symmetry strength, which is our goal. For like return to play is 90% at least, right? For a high level athlete, you need to get 95%, right? That's our metric. Be like, you're good. Let's get after it. And then the confidence that comes with it and subconscious avoidance patterns just because of a confidence avoidance or even fear avoidance because you're just not confident on it. Imagine planting on your leg every time. But anyway, so you had surgery 5 years ago. The rehab was kind of insufficient. You only gained 80% of your leg strength. I'm assuming the range of motion got back to 100%. So let's just assume that. That's usually, it's easier for younger adults to make that happen. And then didn't really work out much. Then went back to exercising at a leg that's not at the capacity the other leg is at, all right, of strength and confidence. And then started running on top of that. So all those things play a role and then they say, my knee's been clicking. So it's like those kind of things all factor in as I'm like, why has my knee been clicking? But general rule of thumb, it's usually underlying lack of stability, a lack of tolerance to the impact, as in like it just wasn't ready for that volume and level and intensity of impact yet. We had to ramp things up incrementally and appropriately, while also strengthening the leg back to 90 to 95% to avoid just the natural compensation patterns that come with. So the knee's clicking because there's usually an underlying instability, a lack of strength, not the best running mechanics, right? Because of underlying compensation patterns and a lack of tolerance to the impact and the volume. And that leads to joint irritation, all right? Mild, subtle irritations where the soft tissue gets more irritable. It gets irritated and inflamed and some swelling, mild swelling gets in the joint. And that leads to more popping and clicking. So the presence of popping and clicking usually represents more fluid and swelling in the joint and irritable tissues. The tissues are irritated, right? That's usually why joints pop and click more. If it's a chronic thing where there's no pain, it's usually because of hypermobility. So a joint pops and clicks more if it's more hypermobile. And that sets the stage for it to be more irritated easier because of an instability issue, all right? It's not as stable as it could be. Sets the stage for it to get more irritable and irritated easier. And that creates more swelling and fluid in the joint. So that presence of swelling and fluid and irritation, that increases and exacerbates popping and clicking in someone's joint. So that's usually the answer, all right? Same thing with shoulder, like shoulder pops and clicks, my neck pops and clicks, my ankles pop and click. The joints that pop and click without some kind of pathology, like without some kind of issue, that represents that those joints are more hypermobile than maybe the joints above or below them, their neighbors, all right? And the disparity of joint mobility, of being hypermobile, that just takes on a lot more brunt of the movement of just daily life, where like water takes the path of least resistance. Our body joints move, the more hypermobile joints that have more available motion will be the first ones to take on more of the movement of like whatever activity you're doing. So if turning your head, right? Segmentally, some segments in the neck will take on more brunt or more of the motion to make that rotation in your neck happen. And it's usually mid-cervical. It's pretty classic. Mid-cervical hypermobility. The shoulder joint, same thing. The glenohumeral joint is the ball and socket joint. That joint's usually more hypermobile than the scapula. The scapula the scapulothoracic joint or the scapulothoracic joint, and it has to rotate and move and protract, retract, and upwardly rotate, or abduct, which is like retraction. It has to do that in addition to your shoulder joint contributing to overhead motions or reaching and stuff like that. So if the glenohumeral joint is naturally more hypermobile and it continues to facilitate that, like the path of least resistance, like water, it's going to just be more hypermobile. And that makes that joint pop and click more just with daily movement stuff. So, and then same with the knee, usually the knee is going to be more unstable and hypermobile compared to its instability. That sets the stage for it to be more hypermobile. And micro shearing, micro compensations, and micro movements in the knee excessively compared to what it was previously and what it's ready to tolerate for impact, which is like running. It's going to set the stage for things to get a little bit more irritable, more irritation, more stress that the tolerance that it can take. And that over time creates more irritation and swelling in the joint and the soft tissue structures, and then more presence of swelling and fluid, more clicking and popping. So that's where that kind of comes from. And that's my lens on that. So with him, like this patient, I'll be like, we need to investigate the strength, clear the range of motion, make sure the range of motion is full, because if it's not, then we have to make efforts towards that. Full knee extension, full flexion. Knee extension is the more difficult priority. It's the more priority to get is just getting the knee fully straight, or a couple degrees hyper compared to what the other leg is like. And the goal is to get symmetrical to the other leg. And if that leg is 2 degrees hyper extended, then the injury knee needs to also, the surgery knee needs to get to that point too. That's the goal. All right, but we're going to check that out. We're going to investigate his strength. Usually the quad strength is the first one we have to look at. And if it's not as strong as it could be, then we got to start working on strengthening, eccentric strengthening, dynamic knee, hip stability, balance, and proprioception. And that dynamic stability translates to doing more challenging things, and then we can wean into running, and then also look at the running mechanics. And then we dial in like what volume and intensity level right now is appropriate for the stage of your knee and the strength of it right now. It's just not ready to run a marathon tomorrow. Like, well, so then what is appropriate? Well, I mean, right now, maybe like, let's start doing interval runs. I'm a fan of interval runs, especially at the beginning stages of reintroducing a new exercise like running like this. Interval runs. All right. So we're doing like run a half of a mile and then walk a quarter mile. Run half a mile and then walk a quarter mile, and do multiple rounds of that. So like on a track, we would say be like run the long leg and then run the short curve. Run the long leg and then run the short curve and do 4 laps. And that would be a mile. All right. So it's like run, if you get what I'm saying, like run the straightaway, but then walk the curve. Run the straightaway, then walk the curve. And then for 4 laps, that's a mile. You just traversed a mile in an interval pattern. All right. And then maybe take a break, and then 10 minutes, and then do it again. And that'd be 2 rounds. That's 2 miles that you traversed. But just, I'm a huge advocate for interval training for stuff like this, so that we make sure a person can feel what they're trying to feel. And also, so they need to take a break or stop. Like, the bottom line is it's overwhelmed. We have to break, it's a stop. Like, if you continue, it's just going to make things more irritable. Where we're not looking at tomorrow as in like, my checklist today was to run 5 miles. My checklist would be finish it with no pain, right? That's the goal. And no more swelling, because that means you didn't overwhelm the joint and the tissues. And I'm looking at like, what's 6 months look from now, or 3 months? What's 12 weeks from now look like? If continuing this path of like, when I finish, I didn't have pain or swelling, I'm good. Let's stop. Let's live to fight another day. Do it again the next day, and be mindful in the meantime of like, what am I feeling? Do I need to dial it back? Then we can dial it up. Dialing it up is easy. Dialing it back is hard for high level motivated individuals that are trying to like train for stuff. But I'm looking at like, if we continue that path of like, it doesn't hurt, it's not swollen after this intervention that we did of what day of my exercise, do it again the next day or day after that, that incrementally stacks way better. What's that look like in 3 months? Way better. Rather than, it kind of hurts and it feels a little swollen, but I got through it. I mean, that is just going to continue to linger, swelling and pain over time, and it's just going to not allow things to heal and facilitate the healing process as well as it could. So that's kind of the conversation we have. And to answer the question of like, why is my knee clicking, right? And it could be to dive into that. One last thing would be, is it the patellofemoral joint, or is it the femoral tibial joint, right? So like the femur on the tibia, the thigh bone on the shin bone, doing micro compensations and micro shifting, which is like micro shearing, which is a stacking stability problem? Or is it the patellofemoral joint, which is the patella gliding in the trochleus of the femur, where that's also unstable if it's making micro movements, micro shearing, or if it's not gliding inferiorly efficiently enough, if the glide is stiff and not gliding as smooth as it could glide or easily pliable as it could be, then we need to intervene there. And then that also, if that is occurring, it's usually some kind of pelvic hip instability that we need to look at, or ankle mobility, dorsiflexion mobility, and also foot arch stability. Those kind of things all factor in of like, what's the course of action and what are we going to work on, and what's the problem and why, right? So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always open to having a conversation of what we can fix you. If you have an issue, what we can fix it like for you, what the course of action for you would be. And we'll catch y'all next time.